Welcome to toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're going to be looking at repairing this vintage LJN Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Warduke figure. As you can see here, this poor chap has had a little bit of a battle. I'm going to say strong heart won on this one. His legs have come off and his head has snapped off, so he needs a little bit of work. He's more one of the knights that say knee at the moment from Monty Python, because yeah, look at him. Really can't do much with him. Now, Warduke is one of those figures I've always loved. It's been one that I've had in my collection for many years. I actually remember buying Warduke back in 1983, and I really played with that figure a lot. It was just my go-to sort of evil looking figure, and over the years I've collected quite a few of them. As you can see here, I have a carded version of an original Warduke. I've got the little small version of Warduke. I've got a few of the figures out here just to show you, and I've even got this really cool custom that was made by For the Love of Old Toys, which is a mishmash of Darth Vader and Warduke, now called War Vader for the Space War Dragons line. I've just always loved this figure, so I thought this was a really cool custom that was done by these guys. So yeah, I've loved him for a long time, and I've wanted to do some work on Dungeons and Dragons figures on this channel for a while, and not actually sort of worked out what I could do. But a common problem that you do see with these figures, apart from the head snapping off, which I've seen quite a few times now, is the fact that they are built with O-rings, and we all know that O-rings tend to perish over time, and we're starting to see more and more of these figures like this with the legs fallen off. So today what we're going to do is we're going to work out how to reattach his head, and we're also going to work out how to reattach his legs so that this Warduke can get back fighting and face the rest of the Dungeons and Dragons line. So here we have Warduke, and I have to straight away say a big thank you to Christopher and Courtney, who actually sent this figure in with a whole load of other pieces. And as soon as I saw this figure, I thought I knew I got to get him fixed up, because I can't see a Warduke left like this. Now, a common problem with these Wardukes seems to be that the head tends to snap off. I've seen this multiple times now. There's a post that's supposed to stick out of there, which sticks in the head. On this one, it seems like the post has actually come out as well, but that's how the head is held on. And there are two versions of Warduke. There is this version here, which has the O-ring that holds the legs on, and then there is a later version which has a battlematic action, which means that you push this button on the back and the arm swings up and down. So on this one, this is an early version, and it should make it quite easy to fix. I think the fix I'm going to show you would work on the battlematic version as well, although you might need to be a little bit more careful because we have to drill a hole into the top of this, but I think that can be fixed quite easily. And then we have the problem with the legs, which these are constructed sort of similar to the way that GI Joes are constructed. So you have a little T-post here with a hook on it, and then an O-ring that hooks around a post on the inside of the body. But unlike GI Joes, these are not screwed together, so we have to work out a way of getting something new in there without splitting this figure. And I think that can be done quite easily, so we will do that as well. But first thing, let's repair his head. To fix Warduke's head, I'm going to be showing you the method that I've used many times before to fix Star Wars figures, and that is to use a piece of Lego. So I've got my handy little Lego pot here of useful pieces, and in that we have this, which is a Lego Technic axle pin. So it's got a bit of an axle there and it's got a bit of a pin there. This is ideal for fixing heads. I'll just bring in my Luke X-Wing pilot. So you can see here, this is a Luke head, and you can just take it off like that. So there's a Lego axle pin there. It's very easy to do. That pops on and you can then move the head nicely. I'm going to be using this because I'm hoping that once it's all fitted, I can then actually swap these heads around, so I could end up with a Warduke in a sort of X-Wing pilot outfit, which I think will be quite good fun. What you've got to do is just drill a couple of holes. In the bottom of the head, we need to drill a hole so that we can put in the sort of the pin part of it, and then into the body we also need to drill a hole so we can put in the axle part of it, and we'll glue that in place and then do a few little modifications. Axle pins or Lego pieces are all pretty much the same size all over. So this is actually a 5mm diameter pin, so we need to drill a 5mm diameter hole into both of these. I'm going to drill very carefully into the head because obviously I don't want to drill too far in. I don't want the drill to come out the top of his head. And in the body, again, I'm going to drill quite carefully because I'm not quite sure what's inside these. In this version there's no mechanics, but in the Battlematic version there's going to be lots of gears. So if you're fixing a Battlematic version, I would say drill very, very carefully and just drill a little bit, and then you can always cut this down before you stick it in place. But let's get these two holes drilled, and then we'll get this head reattached, and at least he will then be able to look like he's ready for action, even though he doesn't have any legs. Okay, so there you go, that's 2 holes drilled. It doesn't take long at all, so those are 5mm holes. Now we need to modify this Lego axle pin just a little bit. As you can see in the middle there is this sort of little rim of plastic, and that tends to get in the way. You can sort of countersink the holes a bit so that that rim then sort of lies a bit flush with the surface, but actually the easiest way to do it is just to get a pair of plastic nippers and trim it off. So I'm just going to quickly cut around here. If you don't trim this off, you end up with a little bit of a gap between the head and the neck, and it doesn't look like it sort of fits properly. So the easiest thing really is just to cut that off like that. And now these are very tight fits already, but I am going to put a little bit of glue on this so that when I push that in, it just glues in place. So I just have some Loctite super glue here and a little drop of that around the edge, and we'll glue it in. So the axle part of this goes into the body, and then the pin part goes into the head, enabling you to easily remove the head. So let's get this glued in, and then we can test fit everything. And I can also try some Star Wars heads on this figure, and also Warduke's head on some Star Wars figures. There you go, a little bit of glue on that. And we'll just pop that in. As I say, this is a tight fit. I've sort of specifically made it a tight fit so it really holds in place. In fact, almost too tight on this one. I can't get that in. Here we go. Just like that. So that is now glued in place. We'll just let that glue go off, and then we'll try the head. Okay, that glue has now had time to set, so we can test Warduke's head on it. So that should just pop on the top like that. And there you go, you can see that's fitted really nicely, moves around very nicely, and we can pose him properly. And the great thing with this is, as I say, we can now remove that head. We've still got the post left in the body, and I can get some of my other modified figures. So here we have a Biker Scout. So we can have a Biker Scout version of Warduke, or we could have a Warduke version of a Biker Scout, just like that. It really makes for a good sort of extra bit of play value that we can swap these things around. I've always enjoyed this sort of modification on figures. So you can see here I can have a Luke Biker Scout, which looks quite cool, or let's have a Luke version of Warduke there. Not quite so good because it's such a spindly head, but it's a very useful thing to be able to do. I've also fixed arms like this as well. But let's put Warduke back. So we now have Warduke at least with a head on, and let's get on to fixing his legs. Now we come to the fun bit, which is trying to reattach the legs. Originally you can see these were held on with an O-ring, and that O-ring has snapped. This is going to be a problem that will affect these toys more and more in the years to come, because these O-rings are now, well, almost 40 years old, and the rubber that's used for them does tend to perish. It's exactly the same rubber that's used in G.I. Joe figures, and those are always, the O-rings are sort of breaking on them and you have to replace them. The problem though with these figures, if I just take that old O-ring out, you can see we've got a hook there. The problem with these figures though is that you can't open them up because they are sort of glued together. G.I. Joes have a screw in the back and you just unscrew the figure. On these ones they are always glued together. So what we've got to do is get something new in and around that little post that you can see just about there in the middle. Can you see there's a post? That is what we've got to get some elastic around or something like that so that we can then reattach the legs. And to do that we're going to be using a small piece of beading wire. So this is quite thin, flexible wire. You only need a short length of it. And what we've got to do is basically make a little sort of U shape at one end of it, about 1 centimetre long. It doesn't need to be particularly long because you've got to sort of push this into the body and then hook it back out again. So you can see there I have a sort of 1 centimetre U shape. And now what I'm going to do is thread that into the body. So you can just about see the post there. And I have to push this bit of wire in, hook it around the back of that post, which is sort of easier said than done. But there you go, you can just about see that I've now hooked that around the post. So there's a little bit of wire this side, and then you have to grab it with something like these. These are forceps. I'm just going to put the forceps in, grab the end of that wire and then pull it out, and you can see we now have a piece of wire that is threaded around that post, and that's the starting point. Once you've got that, you can then easily thread something else through, and we're going to use a little bit of elastic and use that to attach the legs. Now that we have the wire through, we now need to use that to thread a piece of elastic through. I was thinking of using this 1mm stuff, but I think that might be a bit too thin. So I've actually got this stuff, which is 2mm thick black elastic. I thought I actually had more than this in my toolbox, but this is all I have left. But it should be enough. So we will just be using this very short piece of elastic, but with a longer piece of elastic, it might be a bit easier. So what you do is we need to wrap the wire around the end of the elastic, just so that it's held in place and sort of strong enough that we can then pull this through the body. So we wrap this around just a few times, like so. And then we can pull the other end of the beading wire and this should pull the elastic into the body, and we should, if everything goes to plan, be able to pull the other end out the other side like so, take the beading wire off, and we now have a piece of elastic threaded inside Warduke, and now we can use that to tie the legs on. Now this stage is probably easiest to do without a camera in the way, because what I have to do is essentially hook those legs onto the elastic. We're just going to leave them off to one side, and then I'm going to try and tie a knot into this elastic really as tight as I possibly can. So I have to sort of pull everything quite taut, keep pulling it and keep making it as tight as I can, and then we're going to tie a double knot onto that. And you want this as really as tight as you can possibly go, so that everything is held in quite firmly. So do that nice and tight. I'm hoping that is pretty firm. That does feel good. So now I can just trim off the ends of that elastic. We don't need those. We can leave little bits because it will all get sort of hidden inside, but we'll just trim off most of it like that, and then like that. And then we can hoik his legs back into place. There should just about be enough stretch in this elastic. Ah, no, I broke it. Okay, so that didn't go to plan. I was hoping that it was the elastic that had broken, but what's actually happened is that little peg in the middle has actually snapped off. So I think this one might have been slightly damaged beforehand, so it was a bit weak. I'm now going to have to rethink this, because normally all you do is have to tie that elastic round, pop the legs back in place, and there you go, that's Warduke back in action. But in this instance, I've come a cropper, something else has happened, so it's snapped there. So I'm now going to have a little bit of a think to see what I can do. The post hasn't fully snapped off. You can see it's sort of moving around in there. It might be I can glue it, I can plastic weld that back in place, but at the moment I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to have a little think off camera and see. I think maybe just drop a little bit of plastic weld in there, and hopefully that will hold everything back together. But yeah, that's annoying. Sometimes these things just don't go to plan, and you just have to sort of redesign what you're doing as we go. So yeah, let me have a think about that and see what I can do to repair that little post.
Toy-polloi, that is incorrect. Try again.
Right, well, I've had a think and I've had a bit of a modify, and I think I've come up with a solution. As I say, if that peg hadn't have broken, then what I was doing before would have worked perfectly well, and you'd have had Warduke's legs attached quite nicely. But that peg has snapped off. I've put a little bit of plastic weld on it just to see if it will fix it up, but it's just sort of too awkward to get to, so I'm not going to rely on that for holding the legs on. So what I've had to do is actually go back a step. So I've just removed the Lego peg that we put in to hold his head on, and that gives us a nice easy access through the top of the body and through the bottom of the body. So what I'm going to do now, again, I'm going to use this bit of wire, and I'm going to poke the wire through one side and one the other side, because there's actually another fixing post further up about here on the chest that fixes the whole chest together, and we're going to use that part to hold the legs on now. So I'm going to push the bit of wire around one side so that it comes out at the bottom. So you can see there we've got one piece of wire coming through, and then we'll take the other bit of the wire and we'll push it around the other side, and hopefully that should come out as well at the bottom. Just takes a little bit of sort of poking around, because you've got to sort of avoid the arms. And there we go, so we've got another piece of wire at the bottom. So now I have these two bits of wire through, I can use those to pull a thinner bit of elastic through, because I don't actually have any more of that 2mm elastic. And we'll tie it up at the top, just sort of through the neck hole, a bit more like an Action Man, and that will hold the head on. And also use the bigger post in the middle to sort of give it some extra strength, and then we'll reattach the head with another piece of Lego. Sometimes these things happen when you're fixing toys. They don't go smoothly. So, you know, what you think should work doesn't work. I've fixed these before and it's been fine. This is the first time I've seen that sort of post snap off. Maybe I was sort of pulling the elastic too taut. I don't know. Sometimes things go wrong, but you just have to sort of work around it. So I'm now just going to attach the elastic to the wire the same way we were doing on the other one. So you basically wrap the wire around the elastic just enough that it sort of gives it some gives it a bit of hold, and we should be able to pull this then through the body and out the neck hole. We'll do the other piece of elastic on the other side. This is one piece of elastic, I mean, so it's you've got to go through twice. So let's do that first side. We'll pull that through. Which one am I pulling? I'll pull this piece here. So hopefully that should come through the body, again with a little bit of sort of messing around, I guess. Seems to have got caught on something. There we go. So that's one side of the elastic through. And now I'll do the same on this side. So again, we'll wrap the wire around the elastic. That should be fine. And we want to make sure that we don't pull all of the elastic through, because obviously this bottom bit is going to be hooked onto the legs. So I'm just going to put my finger there just to sort of keep everything held where I want it. Pull this one through. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we now have both ends of the elastic through the top, and we have a little loop of elastic at the bottom. So I think what we can do now, let's try this again. So let's attach the legs, slightly different method. So I'm going to hook those on there. And we'll pull this through. This does make it look a lot more like an Action Man. This is how I would wire up an Action Man, so restring an Action Man. So we've got these bits of elastic coming through the top. So if I now tie those off, I'll do that off camera because I actually need to sort of hold this with my knees, and we'll tie that off nice and taut. That will keep the legs on, and then we'll reattach the head. A little bit of a roundabout route, but I think we're going to get there in the end. As I say, sometimes things break when you're fixing toys and you just have to sort of modify what you're doing. This is a great example of that, and it's actually been quite fun because it just gives me a chance to try something new. So let me tie this off and then we'll put the head back on. Okay, so now I've tied that off, you can just about see a double knot in there, and trim the ends off, and those legs are now firmly held in place. I've modified another Lego peg here, so we can just go and glue that on. So I'll just put a little bit of super glue just around the top of that. We'll glue that in place, and we'll be back to where I wanted to be a few minutes ago. Sometimes these things happen. It's interesting to me. I like it when projects go wrong because it gives me a chance to certainly try some new techniques. So there we go. So we've glued that back on. And now we can try the head on again, which we know fits because we've already done this once. And there we go. So we've now got Warduke. He has his head on and he's got his legs back on, and he can stand again. A slight detour around what I was planning to fix, but it's worked and we are back to where we want to be. And here is Warduke all back together again via a slight detour because, as you saw, something broke that I wasn't expecting to break. But I've now got a very displayable figure. For the moment, I've just taken some weapons off one of my other figures to show you what he looks like complete. But this guy now, we have the removable head, so we can just take that off. And yeah, look, he's got a bit of Lego there, which means, as I showed you, we can swap those about with some of my other figures. And the legs are really nicely held on. If you're doing this yourself, then I wouldn't expect to have that same issue that I've just shown you with the peg breaking. I think this one may have been damaged, or it could be I was just a bit too forceful when tying up the elastic and I tied it too tight. So do go a bit careful with it. But as you can see, sometimes when things break, you just have to go down a slightly different route. And luckily with this one, because the head was already broken, that gave us a different access point and meant that I could then sort of use a bit of elastic in a different way and still get the figure back up and running and back up and very displayable. So sometimes things do go wrong, but just stop, have a little pause, think about it, and often you can just work out a different fix and you'll get to the end result that you wanted. So I need to say a massive thank you to Christopher and Courtney, who very kindly sent this figure over. It's certainly turned out to be a more fun and interesting project than I'd imagined when I started. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.